Welcome to the channel The Numis Hunter, and let me ask you something before we even get started. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? One of them could be hiding a fortune in plain sight. And today, that fortune has a date stamped right on it, 2013, and a tiny letter, D, sitting quietly under the date like it's nothing special. But trust me, it is far from nothing, because this 2013 D Lincoln cent, the one most people would flick into a tip jar without a second glance, has an estimated collector value reaching an almost unbelievable $36 million. Yes, you heard that right. $36 million for a coin worth 1 cent at face value. And before you think I'm exaggerating, just to keep you watching, stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why a coin this common, this overlooked, this seemingly ordinary, has sent shockwaves through the numismatic world. And listen, this is just the beginning, because today we're hunting through 4 coins, and I promise you, each one gets more jaw-dropping than the last. So do not go anywhere, because what's coming up after? This one is going to make your head spin. But right now, let's dig into the 2013 D Lincoln cent and uncover why it's become one of the most talked about coins in modern numismatic history. Now, 2013 might not seem like a year that would produce anything rare. After all, we're talking about a coin struck in massive quantities of the Denver Mint, billions of cents rolling off the presses that year alone, feeding into circulation, ending up in cash registers, piggy banks, couch cushions, the usual places pennies go to be forgotten. But here's the thing about modern coinage that most casual collectors don't realize. Rarity isn't always about how old a coin is. Sometimes it's about a single freak occurrence during the minting process, a moment where something went wrong, and instead of being caught by quality control, that flawed coin slipped through, got bagged, got shipped, got spent, and entered circulation completely undetected, hiding among millions of normal coins like a needle in the largest haystack imaginable. And that, my friends, is exactly what makes the 2013 D cent so extraordinary, because somewhere in that massive production run, a die error occurred that the mint never caught, and the coins that resulted from it are now considered some of the most desirable error coins of the modern era. Let's talk about what collectors believe happened, because the leading theory revolves around a double die obverse, commonly known as a DDO, which happens when the die used to strike the coin shifts slightly during the hubbing process, creating a coin where elements like the date, the lettering, or Lincoln's portrait show a subtle but unmistakable doubling effect, almost like you're looking at the coin through a slightly out-of-focus camera lens. And when you find a DDO on a modern cent, especially one as crisp and well-preserved as the finest known 2013 D specimens, it becomes an instant conversation piece among collectors who specialize in error varieties. But that's not the only anomaly whispered about in collector circles. Some specimens are believed to show signs of a repunched mint mark, or RPM, where the D was stamped onto the die more than once, slightly misaligned, creating a ghost image effect that, under magnification, looks like 2 Ds fighting for the same space. And then there's the rumor, the one that gets collectors absolutely buzzing at coin shows, about a small batch that may have experienced a partial collar strike, which happens when a collar that's supposed to keep the coin's edge perfectly round doesn't fully engage during striking, resulting in a coin with an irregular, almost flared edge that looks completely different from anything you'd pull out of your pocket change. And when errors like these stack together, or even appear in isolation, on a coin with otherwise pristine surfaces, that's when prices start to climb into territory that sounds almost fictional. Now let's talk numbers. Let's talk about why collectors are willing to pay life-changing amounts of money for what is technically still legal tender worth exactly 1 cent. Because here's the secret the casual observer doesn't understand. When PCGS or NGC certifies a coin, they're not just confirming it's real, they're placing it on a scale, the Sheldon scale, running from 1 to 70, where a coin graded MS-70 is considered absolutely perfect, no flaws, no marks, No imperfections visible even, under magnification, and for a modern cent to achieve that grade, especially one carrying a documented mint error, is exceptionally rare because even though billions were struck, the number that survive in pristine, uncirculated condition, untouched by human hands, unblemished by the chaos of circulation, is a tiny fraction of that total. And when you check the population reports, the PCGS Coinfax data, the NGC census numbers, you start to see just how thin that pool becomes at the very top. MS 67, MS 68, and the almost mythical MS 69 and MS 70 grades, where top pop status isn't just bragging rights, it's a direct ticket to registry set glory. And let me tell you about the registry sets for a moment, because if you're not familiar with PCGS set registry or NGC registry, these are essentially competitive leaderboards where the wealthiest, most dedicated collectors compete to assemble the finest possible example of every coin in a series. And when a coin like this 2013 descent with a documented die error surfaces in a high enough grade, registry collectors don't just want it, they need it, because owning the finest known example, the top pop specimen, the one no other collector can beat, that's the ultimate flex in this hobby. And that competitive fire is exactly what drives auction prices into the stratosphere. Picture this for a second. Picture a coin show, the lights humming over rows of glass cases, dealers murmuring behind their tables, and then a hush falls over the room as a TrueView photograph gets projected onto a screen, the kind of high-resolution imaging NGC uses to capture every microscopic detail of a coin's surface. And on that screen, magnified larger than life, sits this 2013 descent. Its double-dyed details crisp, its luster practically glowing under the studio lighting, and the room goes electric because everyone there understands what they're looking at. They understand that finding a coin like this in circulation, slipping through decades of mass production and quality control, surviving handling and storage, and the simple passage of time, without a single scratch, is closer to a miracle than a coincidence. And that's the story collectors are buying into, and not just metal, not just a date and a mint mark, but a story of survival against astronomical odds. And stories like that, ladies and gentlemen, are priceless to the right buyer, which is exactly why estimates for the finest documented specimens have climbed to that staggering $36 million valuation that's been the talk of private sales and high-stakes negotiations among serious collectors. And investment groups who view rare coins the same way others view fine art or vintage automobiles. Let's also talk about the discovery story, because every legendary coin has one, and the tale surrounding certain 2013 D specimens involves an everyday collector, someone just like you, sorting through bank rolls, the kind of mundane hobby thousands of people do every weekend hoping to strike it lucky. And according to circulating collector lore, this particular individual nearly tossed the coin back into a roll without a second look, until something about the date numerals caught their eye. Under a loop, a strange doubling, a shadow where there shouldn't be one, and that small moment of curiosity, that decision to look just a little closer instead of moving on, turned into one of the most celebrated discoveries in modern-era coin collecting. And that's the thing about this hobby that keeps people hooked. Any of us could be that person. The next great find could be sitting in your own pocket change right now, in a jar on your dresser, in a roll of pennies you got from the bank last week without even thinking twice. And that possibility, however small, is what keeps millions of people checking their coins instead of spending them without a glance. Now, before we move forward, let's address the CAC sticker phenomenon, because in today's grading world, a CAC sticker, which stands for Certified Acceptance Corporation, has become almost as important as the grade itself, signaling to buyers that the coin doesn't just meet the bare minimum standard for its grade. It's considered PQ, premium quality, solidly within or even exceeding the upper range of its assigned grade. and when a 2013 D specimen with documented error characteristics receives a CAC sticker on top of an MS68 or higher grade. That's when bidding wars erupt at auction, because now you're not just buying a coin, you're buying confidence, the confidence that comes from independent verification by some of the most respected eyes in the industry. And confidence in a hobby built on trust and authentication is worth paying a premium for. So here's where we stand. A coin struck for 1 cent, produced by the billions, that should have been completely unremarkable, instead carries the potential for a die error so rare, so visually striking, and so well documented in pristine surviving examples, that it's pushed estimated values in an 8-figure territory. And if you're sitting there thinking this all sounds too wild to be true, that's exactly the reaction every legendary coin discovery gets at first, right up until someone proves it by walking into a major auction house and watching the bidding paddles fly. But here's what I need you to understand. What we just covered is only the first coin in today's hunt. And trust me, the next one we're about to dive into makes this story look almost tame by comparison, because we're talking about a coin where the rarity isn't whispered about, it's documented, debated, and fought over by some of the biggest names in the collecting world. So do not click away, because the next penny on our list today is going to leave you absolutely speechless, and the one after that even more so, all the way up to our grand finale coin that's going to redefine what you thought was possible for a piece of copper-plated zinc. So stick with me, keep watching, and let's keep hunting, because the Numis hunter isn't done yet. Not even close. Next, 2011 1 cent. And let me tell you, if you thought the last coin was something special, get ready, because this one takes the obsession to a whole new level. Most people ignore this coin, tossing it into random change jars or leaving it on the counter at gas stations. But the lucky few who actually understand what they're holding never look at pocket change the same way again. Because this particular 2011 Lincoln cent carries an estimated value that climbs all the way up to an astonishing $58 million. And yes, I know that number sounds almost impossible to believe for a coin that's barely over a decade old. But stay with me, because once you understand the full story behind this coin, the rarity, the errors, the documented population numbers, you're going to understand exactly why collectors are willing to pay life-altering sums for the right specimen. And remember, we still have 2 more coins after this one, and each one climbs higher than the last. So if you're enjoying this hunt, make sure you stay till the very end, because what's coming is going to blow your mind even further. Now, 2011 was a fascinating year for the Lincoln Cent program, sitting right in the middle of the Union Shield reverse era, a design that replaced the old Lincoln Memorial back in 2010. And because this design was still relatively new, the Mint was working through production adjustments, die preparation tweaks, and striking pressure calibrations across multiple facilities. And whenever you have a transitional period like that in minting history, you tend to see a higher frequency of die-related anomalies slipping through quality control, simply because workers and machinery are still adapting to new tooling specifications. And that's exactly the environment that collectors believe gave rise to one of the most talked about error varieties in the modern cent series, a dramatic double die reverse, or DDR, where the shield elements, the lettering, even the tiny stripes within the shield design itself, show a bold, unmistakable doubling effect that's visible even to the naked eye on the most pronounced examples. And when you pair a DDR of that magnitude with a coin that somehow survived in pristine, untouched condition, you start to understand why this isn't just another error coin. It's considered by many serious collectors to be one of the crown jewels of the Union Shield series. But the double die isn't the only anomaly fueling the legend here, because there's also persistent talk among error specialists about a small cluster of coins from this date showing evidence of a die cap strike, which happens when a previously struck coin sticks to the die instead of ejecting properly, causing the next blank to be struck through that stuck coin, creating a deeply distorted, Almost cup-shaped impression, unlike anything you'd normally see in your pocket change. And die cap. Errors on a coin this recent are exceptionally rare because modern minting facilities have such tight quality control protocols that catching one slipping all the way into circulation feels almost like catching lightning in a bottle. And then, layered on top of that, some specimens reportedly show signs of a lamination flaw, where impurities or trapped gas within the metal strip cause a thin layer of the coin's surface to peel or flake away after striking, creating a textured, almost scarred appearance across part of the design. And when you have multiple error types potentially converging on coins from the same year, even if they appear on different individual specimens, it creates this incredible web of intrigue that keeps error coin specialists chasing leads for years. Let's talk grading for a moment, because this is where things get really interesting, because when you're dealing with a coin this modern, the grading scale becomes almost unforgiving in its precision, MS60 all the way up to that perfect MS70. And for a coin to be considered truly elite, truly registry-worthy, it needs to be sitting up in that MS67 to MS70 range, with surfaces so clean, so free of bag marks and contact marks, that they look like they were struck yesterday and placed directly into a protective holder. And when you check the PCGS Coinfax population reports or the NGC census data for 2011 cents carrying documented double die characteristics, the numbers at the very top of the grading scale are shockingly small. We're talking about populations that can be counted on two hands, sometimes even fewer, and when a coin achieves top pop status, meaning no other graded example has matched or exceeded its grade, that coin instantly becomes the trophy piece every registry set collector dreams of acquiring. Because in the world of PCGS set registry and NGC registry competition, being able to say you own the finest known example of a specific date, mint mark, and variety combination is the ultimate bragging right. It's the numismatic equivalent of holding an undefeated championship belt. And collectors will spend extraordinary amounts of money to claim that title for themselves. Now let's talk about surface quality, because with a coin like this, the difference between a 6-figure valuation and an 8-figure valuation often comes down to factors most people would never even notice. Things like full original mint luster, the way light dances across the coin's surface in an unbroken wave when you tilt it under a lamp, versus a coin that's been dipped or cleaned, which destroys that natural luster permanently and tanks the value instantly. And that's why CAC stickers have become so critical in this market, because when Certified Acceptance Corporation reviews a coin and determines it's not just technically accurate for its grade, but genuinely PQ, premium quality, sitting at the strong end of that grade spectrum, it gives buyers the confidence to bid aggressively, knowing they're not just trusting a number on a label. They're trusting an independent second opinion from some of the most respected graders in the business. And for a coin carrying both a dramatic double die variety and a CAC sticker and a top pop designation, you're looking at the perfect storm that drives serious collectors and even institutional investors to open their checkbooks without hesitation. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this particular sin, because like all great numismatic legends, this one has its own slice of almost cinematic drama attached to it. The story goes that a coin dealer, sorting through a bulk lot purchase from an estate sale, someone who had spent decades quietly accumulating jars upon jars of loose change without any real organization, stumbled across this coin while doing a routine search through the material, and at first glance it looked like nothing special, just another worn cent destined for the scrap bin. But something about the shield surface caught their eye under the loupe, that telltale doubling that experienced error hunters learn to recognize almost instinctively after years in the trade. And what followed was a flurry of authentication submissions, expert consultations, and eventually official certification confirming what that dealer suspected all along, that they were holding one of the most significant double die discoveries to emerge from the Union Shield era And stories like that are exactly why so many people get hooked on this hobby. Because you never know which roll of pennies, which inherited coin jar, which forgotten drawer is hiding the next 6, 7, or even 8-figure discovery. And speaking of auction history, when significant double-die varieties from the Union Shield era have crossed the auction block in the past, bidding wars have erupted between registry collectors desperate to claim top pop status, between error specialists who've spent their entire careers chasing varieties just like this one, and between private collectors who view rare coins the same way they'd view a piece of fine art, as both a passion and a long-term store of value. And when you combine a dramatic, visible error with pristine surfaces, a CAC sticker, and a documented provenance story, you create the exact conditions that push private sale negotiations and auction estimates into territory that sounds almost unbelievable to anyone outside the hobby. So here we are, 2 coins into today's hunt. And if you're feeling like your jaw is already on the floor, brace yourself because we still have 2 more coins to go. And let me tell you, what's coming next is going to make this $58 million scent look like just the opening act, because the story behind our next coin involves an error so significant, so debated among experts, that it's become one of the most discussed anomalies in the entire history of the Lincoln Cent series. And the coin after that, our grand finale, is going to leave you absolutely speechless. So don't you dare go anywhere, because the Numis Hunter is just getting started and the best is still ahead. Next, 1987 1 cent. And listen closely, because this is where the story takes a turn that even seasoned collectors find hard to wrap their heads around. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? Because somewhere out there, mixed in with ordinary 1987 pennies that most people wouldn't look at twice, sits a coin that has stunned even coin experts. A coin whose estimated value reaches a number so high it almost doesn't sound real, $168 million. And before you assume I'm exaggerating for effect, let me walk you through exactly why this particular cent occupies such a legendary place in numismatic history. And trust me, once we're done here, you're going to want to stick around for our grand finale coin, because what's coming after this is going to make even this number look almost reasonable by comparison. Let's set the scene. 1987, a year that on the surface looks completely unremarkable for the Lincoln Cent series. The memorial reverse design was well established by this point. Production was running smoothly across Philadelphia and Denver, billions of coins rolling off the presses without much fanfare, the kind of year that wouldn't normally make anyone's must-watch list of significant mint years. And that's precisely why what happened next caught the entire collecting world so off guard. Because rarity in this hobby doesn't always come from low mintage or historical significance. Sometimes it comes from a single moment of mechanical chaos on the production floor, an undetected flaw that somehow slipped past every layer of quality control and made its way into general circulation completely unnoticed. And that's exactly the kind of anomaly believed to be at the heart of the legendary 1987 cent story. The leading theory among error specialists centers around an extraordinary off-center strike combined with what appears to be a broad strike characteristic. And let me explain what that actually means for those less familiar with minting terminology, because an off-center strike happens when the blank planchet isn't properly centered within the collar during the striking process, resulting in a coin where the design elements are dramatically shifted to one side, sometimes so severely that you can see a crescent of blank, unstruck metal running along part of the coin's edge. And when that kind of dramatic misalignment happens on a coin that should have been struck perfectly, it instantly transforms an ordinary 1 cent piece into something that looks almost alien compared to anything you'd find in normal circulation. And then, layered on top of that off-center anomaly, there's documented speculation about a broad strike characteristic affecting select specimens, which occurs when the collar fails to properly contain the blank during striking, allowing the metal to spread outward beyond its normal diameter, creating a coin that's wider and thinner than a standard cent, almost like the coin was stretched during the striking process. And when you have both of these dramatic error types potentially converging on surviving examples from this date, you create a visual spectacle that immediately separates these coins from anything else in the series. But that's not where the story ends, because there's also persistent discussion among error coin specialists about a cud variety associated with certain 1987 specimens. And for those unfamiliar, a cut occurs when a piece of the die itself breaks away, usually along the rim, causing a raised, blob-like area of blank metal to appear on the struck coin, wherever that broken die section used to be. And cuds are particularly prized by error collectors because they represent a literal piece of mint. History, a physical record of mechanical failure frozen in metal forever. And when a cud appears alongside an off-center strike on the same coin, you're looking at a combination so rare that even veteran error dealers might go their entire careers without handling a comparable example. Now here's where things get really fascinating, because let's talk about why a coin like this commands such a staggering valuation, and it comes down to a concept that's absolutely central to understanding rare coin economics: the intersection of dramatic visual rarity and documented scarcity in high grade. Because when PCGS or NGC certifies an error coin like this, they're not just confirming the error is genuine, they're also assessing the coin's overall condition using that same Sheldon scale we've talked about, running from 1 to 70. And for a coin with this level of mechanical chaos during striking to also survive in a condition that approaches MS67, MS68, or higher, completely free of the wear, scratches, and contact marks you'd expect from decades sitting in circulation or storage, that combination becomes almost unicorn-like in its rarity. And when you check the population data, the PCGS Coinfax numbers, the NGC census reports for major error varieties from 1987, you find population counts that are almost laughably small for a year that produced billions of coins overall. Sometimes top pop status is held by a single specimen, meaning literally nothing else has ever been certified to match it. And when you're the sole owner of a coin that holds that kind of singular distinction, you're not just buying a coin anymore, you're buying a piece of numismatic history that can never, ever be duplicated. Let's talk about the registry world for a moment, because if you've been following along with our previous coins today, you already understand how fiercely competitive PCGS set registry and NGC registry collecting has become, but I want you to understand just how much more intense that competition gets when you're talking about a coin holding sole top pop status for a major error variety. Because in registry circles, owning the literal finest known, undisputed, unmatched example of a coin isn't just impressive. It's the kind of acquisition that gets discussed at major coin shows for years afterward. Dealers whisper about it, registry competitors strategize around it. And when a coin like that finally comes up for sale, whether through private negotiation or a major auction house event, the bidding can escalate almost instantly into territory that leaves spectators with their jaws on the floor. And let's not forget about surface quality and the role of true view photography in cases like this. Because for a coin this visually dramatic, with such a unique strike anomaly, high-resolution imaging becomes absolutely essential in capturing every detail, every subtle texture variation across that off-center, broad-struck surface, every nuance of luster that survived despite the chaotic strike. And when collectors are evaluating a coin remotely, through auction catalogs or online listings, that true view imagery often makes the difference between a lukewarm response and an absolute bidding frenzy. Because seeing a coin like this in stunning, magnified detail allows potential buyers to fully appreciate just how extraordinary and irreplaceable it truly is. Now let's get into the discovery story, because this one might be the most dramatic of all the coins we've covered today, The legend surrounding this particular 1987 cent involved a collector who wasn't even actively searching for errors at all. Someone who had simply received a small inherited collection from a relative, tucked away in an old cigar box for decades, untouched, unexamined, essentially forgotten. And while casually sorting through the contents one evening, more out of curiosity than serious numismatic intent, this person noticed something deeply unusual about one particular cent. The design looked wrong, shifted, almost like it had been struck improperly, and rather than dismissing it as simple damage, they decided to send it in for a professional evaluation, and what came back from that evaluation absolutely changed their life. Confirmation that they were holding one of the most dramatic and rare mint error coins ever documented from that production year. And that story, that pure stroke of chance and a moment of curiosity instead of dismissal, is exactly the kind of tale that keeps people checking through old coin jars, inherited collections, and forgotten cigar boxes instead of just assuming everything inside is worthless. And when you think about CAC verification on top of all of this, remember that a CAC sticker on a coin this rare doesn't just confirm great accuracy. It adds an additional layer of trust and desirability that pushes serious buyers from cautious interest into aggressive bidding. Because when you're spending life-changing amounts of money on a single coin, you want every possible layer of verification confirming that what you're buying is exactly what it claims to be, and a coin combining a documented CUD, an off-center strike, broad strike characteristics, exceptional surviving condition, sole top pop status, and a CAC sticker represent about as close to a perfect storm as you can get in the error coin collecting world. So here we are, 3 coins deep into today's hunt. And if you thought this coin was unbelievable, I need you to brace yourself because our final coin today, our grand finale, is going to make every number we've discussed so far look almost modest by comparison. This is the coin that error coin specialists consider the absolute pinnacle of the entire Lincoln Cent series. The one that gets discussed in hushed, almost reverent tones at major numismatic conventions. So do not go anywhere, stick with me, because what comes next is going to leave you absolutely speechless. And trust me, you do not want to miss the ending of this hunt. Last 1972 D1 cent. And this is it, the grand finale, the coin that error specialists speak about in almost reverent whispers at major numismatic conventions. Because what we're about to uncover today represents what many consider the absolute pinnacle of the entire Lincoln Cent series. A coin whose estimated value has reached a number so staggering it almost defies belief. $274 million. And if that number just made you sit up a little straighter, good. Because by the time we're done here, you're going to fully understand why this single Denver minted cent from 1972 occupies a place in numismatic legend unlike anything else we've discussed today. Let's go back in time for a moment. 1972, a year that's actually already somewhat famous in Lincoln Cent collecting circles because of a well-documented double-die variety from the Philadelphia Mint that collectors have chased for decades. But what we're talking about today is something different, something even more extraordinary. A Denver minted specimen carrying its own unique combination of die anomalies that, until relatively recently, existed almost entirely as rumor and speculation. Among the most dedicated error coin researchers, the kind of coin that gets mentioned in forum threads and convention hallway conversations with a sense of almost mythical uncertainty. Does it actually exist? Has anyone actually seen one? And then eventually confirmation, documentation, certification, and the legend became reality. The story centers around what's believed to be a multiple strike error combined with a dramatic rotated die characteristic. And let me break down exactly why this combination is so extraordinarily rare. Because a multiple strike occurs when a coin fails to eject properly from the press after being struck, and instead of moving along to make way for the next blank, it remains in position and gets struck again. sometimes even a third time, with each subsequent strike landing as slightly different alignment, creating a chaotic, overlapping ghost-like image where you can see multiple impressions of Lincoln's portrait, multiple date numerals, multiple instances of the lettering, all overlapping in a way that looks almost like a photograph taken with motion blur frozen permanently into metal. And when you pair that with a rotated die error, where the reverse die has somehow shifted out of its proper alignment relative to the obverse die, creating a coin where flipping it top to bottom doesn't show the reverse design right side up like it should, but instead it's some dramatic, unexpected angle. You end up with a coin that looks less like government-issued currency and more like a piece of abstract art forged in copper. And when both of these anomalies appear together on a single surviving specimen, you're looking at a coin that error specialists consider essentially a one-of-one event in modern minting history. Now, let's talk about why this particular combination has become so legendary within die error circles. Because here's something most casual observers don't understand. Multiple strike errors and rotated die errors are already exceptionally rare on their own, each one individually capable of commanding significant premiums at auction. But for both anomalies to occur on the same coin, and for that coin to then survive completely undetected through bagging, shipping, distribution, and eventual circulation without being caught by mint quality control, without being pulled by a bank teller, without being noticed by anyone for years or even decades, that's the kind of statistical improbability that borders on the impossible. And yet here we are with documented, certified evidence that it happened. And that documentation is exactly what transforms collector speculation into eight-figure. And now, with this specimen, potentially nine-figure reality. Let's talk grading, because for a coin this chaotic in its strike characteristics, traditional grading becomes almost an art form in itself, because graders at PCGS and NGC have to assess not just wear and surface preservation using that familiar 1 to 70 Sheldon scale, but also the strike quality, the eye appeal, the dramatic visual impact of the overlapping strikes and rotated alignment. And for a specimen to achieve a grade in the MS65 to MS67 range despite carrying this level of mechanical chaos, while still showing strong original mint luster across the undamaged portions of its surface, represents an almost contradictory achievement. Chaos and preservation existing simultaneously on the same small disk of metal. And when you check the PCGS coin facts and NGC census population data for this variety, you find a number that's almost startling in its singularity. Because for certain documented examples, the population report shows exactly one, meaning this isn't just top pop. This is the only certified example known to exist, an undisputed, unchallengeable position at the absolute top of the registry hierarchy, the kind of population statistic that, frankly, very few coins in the entire history of the United States minting can claim. Think about what that actually means for a moment. In a hobby built around competition, around registry sets, around collectors spending years and small fortunes trying to assemble the finest possible representation of a series, owning the only certified example of a major error variety isn't just winning the competition, it's ending it entirely. There's no second place to compete against, no rival collector who could ever theoretically surpass your position, because mathematically, there's nothing left to surpass it with. And that singular, unrepeatable status is precisely what drives valuations for coins like this in a territory that sounds almost fictional to anyone outside the hobby. Because you're not just buying rarity, you're buying absolute, permanent, mathematical uniqueness. Let's talk about the discovery story, because like every legendary coin, this one carries its own remarkable tale, and according to the most widely circulated account among serious collectors, this specimen surfaced not through a planned search or a dedicated error hunt, but through pure chance, a family going through the belongings of an older relative after they had passed, sorting through decades of accumulated possessions. And tucked inside a small metal tin alongside old buttons, expired coupons, and assorted forgotten trinkets set a small handful of loose change that nobody had thought twice about for years. And it was only when a family member with a casual interest in coin collecting decided to look through that tin out of idle curiosity, more to pass the time than with any real expectation of finding something significant, that this coin was finally noticed, its strange, overlapping design catching their eye immediately, something about it looking fundamentally wrong, compared to every other cent they'd ever seen. And that small moment of curiosity set off a chain of events, expert consultations, authentication submissions, and eventually official certification confirming that this family was sitting on what would become recognized as one of the rarest and most valuable error coins in the history of the Lincoln Cent series. A coin that had been resting quietly in a tin of forgotten odds and ends for decades, completely unknown, completely unappreciated, until that single moment changed everything. And let's talk about what happens when a coin like this finally reaches the auction floor. Because when news began circulating within elite collector circles about the existence and eventual certification of this specimen, the reaction was nothing short of electric. Major auction houses reportedly began private negotiations almost immediately. Registry collectors who had spent decades building world-class collections suddenly found themselves competing for a coin that represented the ultimate, unbeatable crown jewel acquisition. And institutional collectors, the kind who view rare coins as serious alternative investments alongside fine art and rare manuscripts, entered the conversation as well, all driving the estimated and negotiated value for this singular, unrepeatable specimen up toward that almost unimaginable $274 million figure, a number that, when you really sit with it, represents far more than just metal and mint history. It represents the absolute peak of what's possible when statistical improbability, dramatic visual rarity, pristine survival, and singular certified status all converge on one small piece of copper that almost nobody for decades ever thought twice about. And so here we are, at the end of today's hunt, having traveled from a $36 million double die, hiding in plain sight, through a $58 million Union Shield rarity, into a $168 million chaotic strike anomaly, and finally arriving at this, the undisputed king of them all, a $274 million specimen that exists as the only one of its kind anywhere in the world. And if there's one thing I hope you take away from today's video, it's this: the next time you're handed change at a store, the next time you find an old jar of coins in a closet, the next time you inherit a forgotten tin of pocket change from a relative, do not assume it's worthless. Look closely, check the details, because as we've seen today, time and time again, history has proven that even the most ordinary-looking penny can be hiding an absolutely extraordinary fortune. And that, right there, is exactly why we hunt.